Cybertruck towing 30,000 pounds equals a Tesla semi. We also have a focus on lessons from the parking lots of our service facilities around the world that we think you'll find useful in terms of information. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also wanted to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe. So the first part of our show today is devoted to sort of lessons from our parking lots. The second part of the show is devoted to everything about the Cybertruck, because typically we like to get in a Cybertruck conversation at least once a month, hence the video that we have rolling that you can see of the truck in action. So what's interesting is that our show has viewers around the world, including, I don't know where you're at, but you represent sort of a spread out. And one of the things that happened yesterday is we went by our service facility I was planning to do a show, but there were like 20 mile an hour wind gusts, so we decided not to do it outdoors. But it brought up a very interesting question. If you go back in our shows, we have a show that was on the 3rd of January where we did it in front of the service facility. And why this is a big deal is that if you know what you're looking for based on data, you can actually get information or answers that other people don't have. So the first thing I'd like to do is put out the question to everyone regarding if you live near a service facility or you're going by a service facility, we'd like to ask you to just take a picture of that service facility and just post it up on our Facebook page at Teslafaninsight on Facebook. The reason we want those photos is that it turns out if you know what you're looking for, you'll be able to extract data from that experience that'll allow for a better understanding of what's going on with Tesla. So let me give you a few examples. The best example I can provide right now is that when we last visited the service center on camera, we explained that the place had been picked clean. There were no Model 3s in essence there. There's another key piece of data that popped up, which was we, after Christmas, dropped off goodies for the local service techs or the folks that work at the service facility. What was strange about the visit, it was the first time in the last, let's say, 2 years that we've been there, and the display vehicles on the floor, there's a missing Model 3 there. And it was a very strange situation because the structure of most service facilities, including this one, is in front you have a group of between 3 and maybe 8 vehicles that are test drive vehicles. Then behind that you have a service facility. Then next to that, usually outdoors, is a number of cars with a red tag hanging down that explains pretty much that they're in order to be repaired. And then the one other area is new cars that haven't been delivered yet. So in the case of this facility, what we reviewed in the last 2 shows we did outdoors in front of our service center here was that there are basically no Model 3s available. And one, there's no Model 3s. 2, they actually sold the Model 3 that was on the floor. So in essence, for some reason, in our facility, at least in Tyson's Corner in McLean, Virginia, there's nothing to sell because it was all sold out. So how does this back up? Well, it turns out that if you're looking to figure out did Tesla meet its delivery goals or not, one of the little signals you can use is, are there an overabundance of cars sitting in front of the facility, or is it picked clean like our facility was? And so if we go back and look at visit dates at the same time over the last 2 years, for example, last year, there were actually a few cars left after the push. So what they discussed is the fact that there were cars that were sold but they weren't able to deliver based on, certain issues relative to, government participation. So I kind of bring this up because, in essence, you could tell what the delivery numbers were by actually understanding what you see in the parking lots. And so therefore, it's actually a really useful way to sort of look and have data. And I think what would be really great, particularly like Donovan is in Sweden, he's one of our regular viewers. We have viewers from around the world. I think it'd be really fun to have photos maybe once a month of the service area on that side of the building, so we could see in general what the number of cars are, because if you blow it up, you could actually count the car count, but also perhaps looking at the number of vehicles that are waiting to be delivered to customers that side as well. So I want to start this off with our visit to our service facility yesterday. So the objective of all this is that on our show, our objective is that we want you to know things that other people don't know and be able to use your knowledge of what you see to make better calls. So for our channel check yesterday, we went by the service facility. There's a number of data points that came up. The first is that in the history of us doing this show, we had more cars in the service area yesterday, than I've ever seen. There were approximately 100 vehicles there. The preponderance of the vehicles, so the way it broke down was that we had about 70% of the vehicles were Model S, and so that would be consistent with the age of the vehicle and it needing service, number one. Number two, and so the rest there are a few Model X's and the rest were Model 3s. The next thing is you can see, obviously, and things that one could collect as data is the number of cars of different colors. Green is my favorite color, so they had one Model S that was British Racing Green there that looked great, and I'd love to see that color used more. But in general, it's an array of colors with no predominance that was there. The third thing that we saw in our service facility that was interesting is that we went to the delivery side, and usually they do not allow you to take photos anywhere near the building. You'll be shooed off or get chewed out. We noticed that in our service facility, the area that's designated for vehicles that have not been delivered for customers is indoors, making it harder to sort of take a breath and grab a number. But what we saw was, on average, we see approximately 50 cars in that space. We went to that space yesterday, and there were 16 vehicles in there. Of those, like 4 of them were Model X's, 4 of them were Model S's, and there might have been like 3 or 4 Model 3s. So we thought this was interesting because, in essence, you have this room that's capable of handling perhaps 130 cars. And other than, then there's like 16 cars in there. So did somebody steal all those cars? Did something crazy happen? The point is that we're at the end of the year, the model year. They pushed very hard to reach the numbers at the end. And Tesla maintains a very tight supply chain. So another detail point for our delivery facility. So we're in the greater Washington, D.C. area. So the trajectory of how vehicles move for this area is they're put on a train in Fremont, and then they're shipped to Birmingham, Alabama. And then we have trucks that come from Birmingham with about 10 vehicles per truck that rolls in, delivering vehicles in that fashion. This is different than is typical. Tesla maintains a short supply chain. So basically what we have happen is that if you compare this with how everybody else does things, is there's actually a train depot. We'll call it Baltimore. It's actually one town south of Baltimore, but I'll call it Baltimore for the heck of it. And that facility has a number of trains that arrive there, and then a whole bunch of car carriers that move cars to the dealerships from that spot. So competing entities typically have a lot more inventory sitting than Tesla does, because Tesla's really chasing kind of a just-in-time delivery Hence, they bought a shipping company as well as have started making trucks to deliver their vehicles as a way to limit the amount of inventory that's sitting on the street. So I wanted to sort of run through these points with you because we definitely want to see photos of your service facility, because I think that'll give us a better feel for how numbers look. The question marks that I had there, if you want to count, it'd be helpful to us. Number one is number of vehicles you see, particularly in the service area. Number two, type of cars. Number three, colors. And the fourth question mark we wanted to ask you for is obvious issues. So what I mean by that is that, for example, one of the things we've noticed about threes that are in the service areas is the car will be sitting there and there are these little blue pieces of tape that are stuck to the cars that sort of suggest that there are paint issues related to those vehicles. We haven't seen that much on the Model S or X, but we've definitely seen it on the Model 3. And it looks like the paint, you can sort of tell when there were paint shop issues. Another thing we noticed is that there'll actually be blue tape on there because the windshield, particularly of the Model 3, will actually dip down. And so it's one of the repairs that folks are having to deal with. So we look forward to your comments on this. We also, more importantly, look forward to pictures of your service facilities, because there are things we can deduce from seeing that. And so it would be awesome to have that info. So let's get on to the meat and potatoes today. We like to try to do what I call a beat, where we go back and we sort of visit different vehicles and what circumstances might be. Today's a rare day because we get a chance to actually do a discussion about the Cybertruck, picking up issues that we've seen and represent impactors for that vehicle. So the first one that we sort of noted that was kind of interesting is that it turns out that if you look at a Ford F-150, its towing capacity is 14,000 pounds. The Cybertruck's towing capacity is 14,000 pounds. So it seems as though as Tesla was designing these vehicles, that was the target sort of towing entity that Tesla was focused on as it put it together. So what we thought was interesting about this is there's a question that comes up, and that is, well, what about 20,000 pounds of towing capacity? If you beefed up the truck to allow it to tow 20,000 pounds, it now becomes capable of horse trailers, perhaps small camper situations, etc. And then I thought it was interesting because the other question mark that kind of popped up is, if that thing could be beefed up to a 30,000 pound tow, what would the implications of that be? In particular, you now have a cyber semi. So I thought this was kind of an interesting idea because if in fact that configuration worked, it would mean that, let's say it cost you $30,000 to $50,000 to beef up a $70,000 Cybertruck in terms of suspension, et cetera, to get that thing out the door. So your net cost is somewhere around $130K for that vehicle. The semi itself is scheduled to start out, I guess, around $200,000 and then up. I think there was a discussion of $150 and then $250, depending on the range, with the batteries in mind there. The issue that comes up, though, is one can start playing these games and wondering about, well, what could you do? One of the suggestions, obviously the answer to this initially is no way, you can't do it, particularly because the vehicle has to be beefed up to be able to handle that amount of load. But one of the interesting things that comes up is, for example, there's a company called Frito-Lay, which is one of the big buyers of the truck on the front end, of the semi-truck. And what's interesting is that if they're carrying a lot of potato chips, they need all the space that goes with a semi, but they actually don't need the towing capacity of the full 80,000 pounds that's allowed for a semi. So that's an interesting application of a vehicle, let's say, that can tow 20,000 pounds, which I think it'll be easy to get the semi or the Cybertruck to that. But the problem that popped up and was articulated by our advisor to the show is that you'll notice that Ford has a picture of an F-150 towing a train, and that's definitely doable by all the vehicles in that category, including the Cybertruck. The problem you have when it comes to moving that much weight is not towing it. It's if you're going downhill and you have all that weight behind you, is the vehicle in front of it set up to handle that amount of weight pushing down on that vehicle? And the answer is heck no for a standard pickup truck that tows 14,000 pounds. And the government isn't going to allow you to put that on the street unless vehicle can handle weight exactly in the most difficult circumstances like that going downhill. So the answer is, can the Cybertruck currently tow 30,000 pounds? No way, Jose. Can it be beefed up likely to the 20,000 pound number? Actually, it's a decent possibility at a price that's not going to double the vehicle cost, but the setup of the vehicle lends itself to sort of adds that might include suspension and other changes that support a bigger weight being towed. So we were sort of roaming down this territory because the line to get a semi-truck is likely 3 to 5 years long once they start producing. And if you're not a huge company, there's no way you get a hold of that. And the question is, how can people that are not mega companies get a hold of a semi early? And the answer is to be creative. And we believe that one of those creativity elements is going to be have people purchase their vehicle, ship it to Southern California or other places where we have excellent mechanics, maybe in the Detroit areas, and then have them go to work on setting that vehicle up to handle a larger amount of weight that might be moved behind it. And so we look forward to your comments on this, and I think that it's an interesting sort of what if. The final component of the semi-truck that I'm kind of excited about that's sort of moving forward currently is the fact that we're developing a show about the Cybertruck, and one of the elements that popped up is that we were forecasting prior to, let's say, December of this year, that the Cybertruck would be at least 1 year late, if not 2 years. And the main reason for that is that the Cybertruck is in competition with the Semi, the Roadster, and the Model Y for getting into the marketplace. And one of the things that's a problem right now is the Cybertruck with 250,000 reservations, in essence, needs its own manufacturing facility. In theory, that facility could be the fact that Model Y and Model S are declining in numbers as the 3 and Y become larger. So one theory is that you could convert that factory over to adding the Cybertruck to it, or making it exclusively Cybertruck that's currently doing that. Those are possibilities as the numbers decline on on the Model X and the Model S. But the problem is, if you did it right, you actually need a plant dedicated to that vehicle. And the nightmare right now is, until Tesla does a refi of the loans related to its current structure, they actually don't have the capital to actually execute any other construction. So we're in an interesting position right now, which is tons of orders for the Cybertruck until they change the debt over, and I think it'll just be a refi to better terms because the stock price is so high. So that's the easy part. The hard part is without that refi. So for example, if Tesla's stock price was in the 260, 270 range, the loan covenants would say, nope, you can't do anything else that would generate debt that might affect the current debt holders. But where we are now, I expect in the next 3 to 6 weeks, Tesla will do a number of refis to restructure their debt related to the high stock price. And all of that restructuring will set them up to be able to build at least one, but perhaps 2 or 3 other factories. I would expect somewhere in the United States, somewhere between the Gigafactory and the manufacturing plant in Fremont, in order to produce key vehicles, especially the Cybertruck. So for those of you who are on that long list, I would say that the price of Tesla's stock price just cut 1 year off of how long it's going to take for you to get your vehicle. And I think that's good news. It also cuts time off of how long it is for non-mega companies to get a hold of, nice vehicles or with a lot of flexibility like the Cybertruck in terms of being able to do interesting things with it. So, we look forward to keeping an eye on new developments in this regard, and we'll sort of add to our Cybertruck list of what's going on. Again, I think that with that refi, and once it occurs, once that's redone, you'll start to hear about new things that Tesla's doing, especially building new factories like the Cybertruck factory that allows it to occur. We're at the point now we take Q&A typically with folks. It was just mentioned by one of our viewers that the Semi uses air brakes produced by Westinghouse. So I think that totally makes sense. The issue isn't that the Semi doesn't work or it won't be good or people aren't going to be happy. The issue is that there's a killer amount of demand for that vehicle, and only the largest companies are going to be able to get any inventory in a reasonable amount of time. And the question mark was, could you actually take the Cybertruck and do a retrofit that allow you to get most of the utility of the Semi, but without the price or the long waiting list? And so, so that was the logic of what we were sharing. We're at the point of the show typically where we do our health tips, and then from there we actually go, to our closeout. But if you pose questions, we're happy to respond to those. There's a health tip that I received from a internal medicine doctor at Stanford, and it's been a while, that I was really fascinated by as I got back into sort of heavy workout action. I'm kind of in the once a day, every other day. They were asking about SpaceX being used for vehicles in terms of a delivery system. Excellent question. The only SpaceX interface with Tesla that I'm seeing right now is the fact that Elon did a lecture at MIT, and during that lecture, a weird thing happened. One of the students asked a question about the power being generated by. So, for those of you who don't know about this, for the Roadster, the new Roadster, the specs on it are 600 miles of range, top speed, I think it's 205 miles an hour. There's a whole bunch of data points, 0 to 60, in that 2.2 second zone. So one of the MIT students asked the question, well, it's amazing what that car is putting out. And Elon's response was, that's nothing. You should see for a $150 part that goes into rockets, that, the force or the capability of that part is many times more severe in terms of cost and size of part relative to how much power it puts out. And so the next thing you know, about 6 months later, Elon announced that he was going to, he was actually going to put a sort of a takeoff rocket capability from SpaceX into the Roadster, and I was like, oh my gosh! So in essence, when you take off, you take off, meaning that you're basically being launched in the car by a rocketry capability. So that's the only interface I've seen thus far between the two, or the fact that they shipped that vehicle out into space, or the fact that there's discussion of the Cybertruck being sent to Mars as a move-around vehicle. So those are the overlaps that I've seen go on, but there may be others I don't know about, and we can get comments or questions in the show that might add that in. So our health tip edition today is the fact that if you work out 2 or 3 times a week, what you're doing is consuming the calories that you generated for that day, most likely. If you maybe do a walk in the morning, 15, 20 minutes, and then maybe a power walk, and then you actually do your regular 3 times a week workouts, that walk in the morning will consume calories from that day, allowing the workouts to consume stored calories that might represent extra weight. So if you like to tone up a little bit, etc., you may want to think about a power 15 minutes of walking or running or biking daily to consume calories, and that way you can use your workouts as a way to truly make progress from a tone standpoint, etc. So that's our sort of add to our health tip for the week. Our usual tips are: don't forget 25 leg lifts per leg. It strengthens your quad muscles, reducing knee issues. Number one. Number two, don't go to bed within 4 hours of eating, preferably at least 2 hours, preferably 4. It avoids acid indigestion issues. Number three, well, we've added to that list today, so I'm going to avoid the rest. The next thing I'd like to do is we're going to do our closeout, and then we'd love to have comments and questions at the end. I want to thank Jerry. I saw there was a number of you that further said hello from around the world, including Serbia. Typically, what we try to do is focus on our show topics so we can see when you say hello and try to address that at the end. But that's the situation there. Wanted to thank you again for taking time to join us. Please take time to like and subscribe. We'd love to see pictures of your service facility locally to get a feel for vehicles, etc. One of the things I'll note is that as you have every car, at least at the Model S level, is about $2,500 worth of after shipment repair anticipated. So if that number is higher, it costs them more money. If it's lower, wow, that's amazing. I believe I saw a Chevy 3500 truck commercial that claimed 35,000 pounds of towing. Interesting comment. Thanks for sharing that. So I wanted to note that if you're seeing tons of cars in the service bay, there's a whole bunch of warranted repair that's being done, and that could affect numbers in terms of earnings because you have to deduct those numbers. So if you don't have to do the repairs, the set-asides of $2,000 per car can be baked back into the earnings of the company. But if you have all those repairs, you have the opposite effect. So there is some sound logic to taking a look at what's going on in the service facilities. According to Vladimir asked the question, when does earnings come out? From our understanding, the first week of February is when those numbers are supposed to be shown. And obviously, it's going to be a banner day why hasn't Tesla made a mail truck replacement? Hey, great question. There's a whole bunch of vehicles that Tesla can make but does not make. The most important one is actually the highest polluting vehicle with the most impact if you change them out is actually garbage trucks at $35,000 of fuel per year and huge amount of pollution that's put out for a relatively short-range vehicle that could be charged up in between. And so, yeah, I agree. I mean, the mail trucks are ubiquitous and they represent an impactor on pollution. One of the challenges, though, is that Tesla can't produce enough Ys, Model 3s, semi-trucks, etc. So I think there are a lot of vehicles that they would like to or could produce, but I think that once the company is on a bigger platform of the number of sales that they have coming through, I think there'll be openings for production of other types of vehicles like that are realistic. The one problem I see with that vehicle in particular is Tesla has had a focus, it seems, on more difficult to do things. So, for example, the semi concept was out there for a long time, was not being done, and you've seen Daimler trying to do it for 10 years unsuccessfully, whereas Tesla was able to knock it out fairly quickly because of their expertise. So the answer I want to give you is that there are certain market segments that Tesla has not gone after. It just doesn't have the the inventory to do it, but they're definitely realistic in the future, and the mail truck, I think, is probably one of them. Vladimir asked a question about the batteries and why aren't there enough of them. The answer that we like that we've gotten from, that kind of makes sense from the folks at Panasonic, is that the relationship between Tesla and Panasonic is that, yes, they split the cost of building the factory, but there seems to be a relationship where Tesla can ask for certain numbers of batteries from Panasonic, and Tesla has I want to say, Dell computer setup so that they don't have to pay for those batteries until well after they're delivered. And so one of the challenges that's popping up is you have to have the infrastructure for the batteries and then build them. And all the risk for that goes to Panasonic. So Panasonic's process has been, when we see the orders, both what you're saying you want, and we see the vehicle orders, we'll go ahead and increase capacity to meet that. But until we get that from you, we're not doing it because we get stuck with all the inventory that's unsold and potentially jeopardize the health of our company in the process. So the success of the order book for the Y and what's going on in China, there are a number of variables that have blended in to cause Panasonic to be comfortable ramping up their production levels. So that's one of the holdbacks on when the Y will be delivered. So basically, Panasonic has agreed to put the money in to double the size of the Gigafactory's production. And so therefore, I think that'll happen. Should they triple it? Well, with the semi orders out there, I think they should. There's a comment here about wanting to see Tesla in the light commercial vehicle space, particularly out of the German facility. I think that it's a good idea, and I think that definitely makes sense. At any rate, I want to thank you once again for joining us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German au revoir, French, Lehitrot, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, Zdravstvuyte, Russian, hello, do Virginia. I think we're going to add that one from Vladimir. It's easy, and I don't get in trouble with YouTube when I say that. Also, Hedgedo, and wanted to say, I think our others would be just in Jamaica. We say, enough respect, walk good. Thanks for joining us once again. We look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day. Bye for now. And don't forget to ship over your local service vehicle photos around the world. We'd love to see those and understand what's going on there. Thanks and have a good day. Bye.